Welcome, everybody. Today, we're really pleased to have you attend our Encompass Mental Health and Communication series. I am Louise Hanson. I'm a registered social worker and the program manager for the Encompass program. And on behalf of our entire team, it's my pleasure to host these series. Now, our intent with the communication series is to reduce the stigma around mental health by keeping the conversations going, because mental health challenges are prevalent and no one needs to feel that they're alone in dealing with them. And that really happens best through open conversations. So it's also our intention to share messages of hope for recovery and wellness, to bring in speakers, both professionals and those with lived experience or both, to share education strategies and coping skills, whether that's about recovery or resilience. And so today it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Marc Rainford. But before I do this, just a couple of housekeeping points. We have purposely disabled the cameras and microphones so that everyone can participate anonymously. We are recording the session and host it on the Encompass website to enable access for those who may have missed it or those who wish to rewatch it. As we go through the presentation, you can submit questions through the Q&A feature, which comes to our Encompass team here. And I will read those out to Marc in a non-identifying way for his responses. And Marc's really welcoming questions along the way. So please send those in as you think about them, and I'll direct them to Marc. If you don't have any questions, you just want to acknowledge that what Marc is saying resonates with you. You can type in AAA for awesome into the chat feature. And now to introduce Marc, he is a former Toronto Police Service officer with 15 years of policing experience. He brings over 20 years of experience in community engagement with a specialty in youth and police engagement. He's been a keynote speaker with the Toronto Catholic District School Board on student leadership and mental health resilience, and also with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Conference on mental health and policing. He's also presented to the OPP, Windsor Police, Durham College, and George Brown College. And very importantly, Marc is a husband, proud father of 2 girls, and he is the author as well of an upcoming children's book on mental health and resilience. So Marc, we're really, really pleased to have you with us today as you take us through your lived experience and your perspective on the importance of building mental resilience. And really appreciate you sharing with us some of the strategies that you have found helpful for having a successful career. And so that I'm going to turn things over to you. I understand you have a presentation, so if you want to go ahead and share your screen, that would be great. So welcome so much, Marc. We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Jen and Eric as well. So before I get started, can everybody see my screen okay? That's good. Okay. So I am, let's make sure this gets going. So I'm very, very excited to be here. What I'm going to share, so we're going to have a discussion. What I'm hoping, if I do this well enough, we might not get to the end of my presentation. What I am hoping is that as you hear some of the things I talk about, I hope we're able to create an environment in which, as these questions or comments come up, that you share them with us. And I'm happy for us to take the discussion where we as a group want to go. I think that a lot of us have lived experience that are very valuable, but quite often we don't have spaces that allow us to explore them. And so I look at my ability to present as an icebreaker for these discussions. So feel free to jump in and share. And if we're doing that, we're creating a safe space, which is really the thing that we're trying to seek to achieve. Okay. So I hope that works for everybody. Building mental resilience. In the past, as Louise said, I've presented a lot. I've presented for the past 10 years on this. And when I started presenting, I was presenting from a place of mental illness, mental unwellness, right? And sometimes the term mental health, which unfortunately the term mental health itself has a bit of a stigma. When people talk about mental health, they talk they sort of associate with us talking about people who are actually mentally unwell. And as I went through my journey, I started to realize that much like the rest of our body, we can be ill and we can be healthy. And when we say, hey, somebody looks really healthy, we don't automatically assume something's wrong with them. But when we talk about mental health, quite often we use that term and people actually take it to the side of mental illness. So I'm trying to change the language a bit for us to talk about mental resilience, because it's a process of going from being mentally ill or unwell to being mentally healthy. And we kind of go back and forth between the two. Okay. So what are we going to do today? What we're going to do is I'm going to share a story with you today. And I want you to, as you're listening to me speak about this stuff, I want this to be the area of focus. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. So you're going to hear some things. I'm going to share a story. And as I'm talking about this stuff, I want you to think about my blind spots, the things that I didn't see as they were happening. All right. You're also going to hear about things that happened to people in my life and the impact that silence around this topic has. And we're also going to sort of see the magnitude of stigma and what that can do to the lives of people that are struggling with mental illness. But what we're also going to share, and I'm also going to share some of the strategies that I've learned through dealing with this stuff. You're going to hear about managing your rocks. We're going to talk about identifying safe people. And finally, we're going to talk about sharing your weather. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. So a good friend of mine, a colleague of mine that presents with me sometimes, his brother was a clinical psychologist. And when we spoke to him about presenting on this topic for first responders, this was the quote he provided us, which is really amazing. He said to us that if exposure to psychological trauma is inevitable, then psychological support should also be inevitable. So if we're always dealing with something, we should always know that there are supports in place to help us through that thing. Okay, so our starting point today, there are a couple of things that I want us to sort of establish as I go through this presentation. Those who respond to traumatic events can suffer from those events. It seems like a very obvious statement, but quite often in the first responder world, the culture doesn't make the assumption that when you see something traumatic, we should talk to each other and go, hey, how is that event impacting you? We often kind of just treat it as work and you move on, you clear your call, you go to the next call. We don't really pause for a moment to ponder, is that event going to impact this person? All right, so we have to make sure that we really remember that, it doesn't always, but it can. Another important point is that family members of those responding to trauma can also be victims of that same trauma. And that's a really critical piece that we're starting to see, that first responders, their families quite often have a connection to the things that their family members are actually responding to. And we don't always associate that trauma with the first responder as coming into the lives of the people that they love or live with, right? So I liken this one to secondhand smoke, right? We all have found out that I don't need to be a smoker to be affected by smoke. And the same is true of trauma, right? I don't have to be the person who saw trauma, but if a family member of mine deals with trauma on a daily basis, I too will be impacted by that, even though I didn't see it. And this is the place that we really kind of hope to, is that we can, despite those 2 points, we can still do things, right? We can encourage a conversation like Louise, Jen, and Eric have done today. We can create that space for the conversation, and we can be safe people. And for me, a safe person doesn't have to be somebody that is skilled at asking the right questions. It doesn't have to be a person that knows where the resources are. A safe person is simply somebody that can recognize that the people in their lives might be different than what they normally know them to be, right? And so for me, that could be, hey, Louise, I haven't heard from you in a while. Is everything okay? Just wanted to make sure you're okay, right? I'm a little worried about you. If I'm wrong, I hope it doesn't offend. Just wanted to check and make sure you're okay. That's a safe person, right? And creating safe, supportive environments. So, I think we hear a lot about we have to build a safe space for these things to happen, right? And a lot of people talk about, the reason why we can't discuss this is we don't have a safe space to discuss this. And I want to challenge that just a little bit and help people understand that we are the safe space. There is no space that exists that on its own has been designed to allow us to say, hey, come on in, this room is soundproof, you can talk to each other, don't worry, it's okay. As soon as a person is in a space, we make decisions about that space on its safety based on whether or not we trust the person in the space. So I hope that, by the end of the presentation today, that we connect these two to remind ourselves, I am the safe space. Wherever I go, I can change that space from being unsafe to safe, just by being the person that says, how are you doing? Are you okay? Or checking somebody who makes a statement that might make somebody feel unsafe. I'm the one that gets to correct that. I'm the one that gets to say, hey, I don't know if that's the right thing to say. We might be impacting people, right? So these two, I think, are very connected. And if we hold true to connecting those, I think we can make some progress. So these things can be possible if we're willing to do something, right? And the do something can be very small, right? I think that quite often we think that in order to help people, we have to be skilled at something, we have to have the talent, we have to have the knowledge. I think for us to really make progress, we just have to check in. We just have to start with the most basic thing. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about anything? Or do you just want to walk? Do you just need somebody to be in your space with you to help you get through something? And silence can be that thing, right? So as we go through this today, I am very aware, you're going to hear some very traumatic events from my life. And I know that I'm not the only one that has gone through these things. And so that's a key point in this presentation, is that I am sharing with all of you, not, for, to get through this for me, the poor me mentality. I'm sharing this because I know that other people have gone through many of the things I've gone through. And what I'm hoping to do is kind of say, hey, like, here's some things that work for me. Maybe they might work for you or somebody you know. But in bringing these things up, it might trigger some feelings for those that are listening. And so it's okay to step away. It's okay to mute me. It's okay to say, I can't listen to this guy for the next 10 minutes. That's totally fine. And it's okay if these emotions come out, because these are things that we do to cope, okay? So I am not a mental health expert. I do not have any background in mental health, psychology, none of that. I'm just a guy who's gone through some stuff, and I have been fortunate enough to be given opportunities through Louise and Jen and Eric to be able to share what I've learned in going through this stuff. So that's the lens I'm coming at with respect to this presentation. I am a big advocate for using every tool that's available. If if you have access to the psychologist, the psychiatrist, use them. If you have friends that help you through things, use them. There isn't one path back to mental wellness. So let's use everything that's available to us. Let's use them all. And so I include myself in that some people, just by hearing a story of somebody making an effort or seeing things slightly different, it might motivate somebody to say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to try something. And that's all I want to try and do, is create the opportunity for people to say, I'm going to try. But what I'm proudly a father to this wonderful little girl. I'm a former police officer, and I'm a national champion in soccer. And I share these with you because one of the things that comes up a lot in the first responder world is that some people think that the people suffering with mental illness, they're not the high flyers in their professions, or they're not, high functioning people where they've got lots on the go. They don't always associate mental illness with high performance. And so I share this because, in various aspects of my life, I have performed at a high level while also struggling. And so it's really important for, this point is that the people that you see in your life that are doing amazing things, we also need to check that they're okay. Just because they're doing fantastic things doesn't mean we shouldn't check in and say, hey, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Do you need to talk about anything? Would you like to talk about anything? What are the challenges you face? Because everybody is touched by this topic and everybody could be affected. Okay, so the rocks in the backpack. So I'll give you a little bit of context. When I was asked to speak at the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, this occurred shortly after I told my sergeant that I was diagnosed with depression. And he said, would you speak to the Ontario Association Chiefs of Police? I didn't know who they were at the time. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I thought, yeah, if there's somebody that wants to talk about this, I'm okay to talk about this. And then I thought, how am I going to share with people sort of what I was dealing with? How do I help people understand these complex things in a way that's easy to digest? And this is where this came from. So what I want you to think about as I share the story is, if you think of your mind as a backpack and the stresses and the traumas of life as rocks, the bigger the stress or trauma, the bigger the rock. And what happens is those rocks will eventually make their way into the backpack. And why this is a helpful analogy is that quite often we hear when people are trying to understand mental health, there are people that describe it as that person wasn't strong enough, or that person was weak-minded. And if that's how we're describing mental illness, that contributes greatly to the stigma. Because if we're asking people to come forward and get help, very few people are willing to say, I don't care if you think I'm weak or strong, I'm about trying to take care of my mental wellness. So the analogy works because with a backpack, it doesn't matter if you fill the backpack up with little pebbles, right? Even if you're strong enough to carry that backpack, even if you're the biggest bodybuilder guy, you've got these huge legs, you put the backpack on your shoulder, eventually the backpack itself will run out of capacity. It cannot hold anymore. It doesn't matter if it's a strong backpack or weak, it runs out of capacity. And all those things will spill over, and they spill over into life. So they will affect our work, they'll affect our family life, they'll affect friendships, they'll affect, us physically, our ability to sleep, things like that. So the analogy is really useful because we have to get away from equating mental health and mental illness as connected to whether or not we are strong or weak people, right? That's not what we're talking about, right? We have to really make sure that we're talking about people's ability to manage stress, to manage trauma. And how do we do those things? And how long does it take to do those things, right? So that's what I want you to keep in mind, is this is the tool that I tend to use with a lot of people, and it seems to be effective. So I want to share that with you. So here's my first little rock, a little pebble. My daughter was born August 17th, 2011. And anybody that's a parent knows that as much as you love your kids, even at the very best, they're a stress, but they're a good stress. But it doesn't matter what the stress is, good or bad. It's still something you have to manage. So she was born August 17th. And shortly after she was born, her mom started to hear voices. And she started to talk about, hearing people talk about her on the radio. And I didn't, in spite of being a police officer, I didn't equate what her mother was going through as being part of mental illness. So I tried to support her. I tried to listen to the radio, see if I could catch it. And it sounds absurd now, but her mom is an author, and she's been involved in some things that actually make it somewhat plausible that maybe somebody spoke about her on the radio. So I didn't actually put her mom in a category of, I should talk to her directly about mental health. I kind of just went, okay, can you record it? Can you share it with me? I didn't once kind of go, I need to actually deal with this as a mental illness issue. So she was in my blind spot, and I just let it go. And so months went by. These things kind of kept on going. There was this continuous conflict about people talking about her in a sense of paranoia, and I didn't do anything. Right? I just sort of managed it. Is she functioning at work? Yes. Is she supporting our daughter? Yes. Is she supporting our home? Yes. And in all these little measurements that I had in my head, because she was a high functioning person, still doing all the things that sort of we measure people by, I didn't ever say, she's doing all these things, but she still thinks people are talking about her. And we haven't been able to prove that. So I kept it separate because she's a high flyer. So as this went along, I didn't do anything about it. I didn't, put attention to it from a mental health capacity. Then comes December 24th, and this gentleman is a good friend of mine, Sean Peterson. Sean and I went to university together. He played on that same soccer team that we won a national championship. And on December 24th, Sean called me, and he said that he was in a field. So dead of winter, he's in a field, and he says his wife is leaving him, and he doesn't want to live anymore. So for anybody out there that's in the first responder world, I think we call that a clue. He has told me explicitly he does not want to live. I was able to get him to my house. We spoke about what he was feeling. He told me what was going on with his family, and we spoke into the night. He went to bed. He woke up December 25th, Christmas Day. This picture is actually from Christmas Day. And he said to me the morning of Christmas, he said, everything I said last night, I didn't mean it. I was overreacting. I had too much to drink. I'm fine. And again, with the police background and knowing the requirements of apprehending somebody under the Mental Health Act, here I had a friend who told me this stuff the night before, and then he told me he was okay. He didn't mean it. I didn't follow up. I said, okay, Sean, are you okay? You can stay here anytime you want. That was the extent of what I did for Sean. So things are going okay. I'm still managing. Vivian's mom is still hearing things, and I still am not seeing it as a medical crisis. I haven't followed up with Sean, medical crisis. And on May 22nd, May 21st, Sean calls me and says that him and his wife have sort of fixed their marriage. They're going in the right direction. They've sold their house. They're moving to a new house, and he wants to celebrate. And I said, okay, let's do the celebration. He said, let's go out on May 23rd. I said, okay, no problem. The morning of May 23rd, Sean's wife calls me and says that Sean has been found, and Sean has died by suicide. And when I heard it, I was in disbelief. Even though I know from December 24th, he said what he said about not wanting to live, I still didn't tie that in to his suicide. I still said, no, if Sean was depressed, he would have told me he was depressed. If Sean needed help, he would have told me, because I told him, hey, I'm here for you. I didn't make the connection I spoke to his wife and she said, no, Sean has been depressed for years. And I said, well, how could that be? He hasn't told his best friend. And she said, he didn't tell anybody. He only told me. And it was so shocking to me that I didn't believe he died by suicide. After his funeral, I went to the Durham Regional Police Service. I gave them a statement saying, I don't believe he died by suicide. I think this is related to the marriage. And I gave them a statement on video because I was so in disbelief that my friend, who 2 days prior said, let's meet, had done this. And so I struggled. I took time off work, and I didn't process this well. But yet this whole time, I never sought help. I never went and spoke to anybody. I never thought maybe this trauma is affecting me and it's gone in my backpack more than I could imagine. I didn't do anything. I left it alone. What I did notice was my sleep was starting to get worse. So I was starting to sleep maybe 4 hours a night. And I just attributed that to being a new father, the stress at work. I never connected my sleep being associated to Sean's passing, nor did I associate it to Viv's mom and her struggles. I isolated it to other things, right? August 17th comes along. This is Viv's first birthday. And at her birthday party, her mother has what's called a psychotic break. And she says to everybody at the party, I wish you'd tell us why we're in a reality show. And in that moment, I realized finally, this is mental illness. So we went to the hospital. She spent 7 days in the hospital. And when she came out of the hospital, I was sleeping less and less and less. And work was great. I had a lot of support at work, but I still didn't know what was going on with me. I didn't ask for help. I just kept on going, thinking, you know what? This is stress. That's all this is. This is just a lot of stress. I have to get through the stress. And once I get through the stress, everything's going to be okay. Things deteriorated. They got worse. And by February of 2013, I was now sleeping about 2.5 to 3 hours a night. I decided to go to the family doctor. And when I went to the doctor, I said to her, Doc, I need something for sleep. So again, still not recognizing that my rocks are piling up, right? And the doctor asked me, she said, well, what do you need sleep medication for? And I thought, you know what? It's really none of her business. She should just give me what I need. Apparently medical profession doesn't work that way. They like to figure things out. And so I told her everything that had happened with my friend Sean. I told her everything that happened with Viv's mom. I told her things that were going on at work, the various stresses. And as I was talking to her, she said, you don't need something for sleep. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, you're depressed. And I remember when she said it, I thought, my first thought in my head was like, I'm not depressed. I'm an optimistic guy. I like a good gag. I like to make people laugh. That's not depression. Depression is some other thing, but it's not me. It's not that. And I said to her, well, Doc, I don't feel depressed. And she said, you don't feel it. That doesn't mean you don't have it, right? And so she talked to me about brain chemistry and, different chemicals in the brain and that trauma can impact them. And as she spoke, I was like, okay, that actually does make sense. And when she told me, she gave me this prescription and I was still okay. I went and got the prescription. And then as soon as I had to fill the prescription and call my parents, that's when I saw the stigma of mental health. So I was okay getting the prescription. I was okay filling the prescription. I was okay taking the prescription. I then had to make a phone call and I phoned my parents, and I'll never forget it. The day, I still feel it's still powerful to me. The day I called my parents and I said to my mom could hear it in my voice. And she said, are you okay? And I actually said, no. I said, no, I'm not okay. And she said, why not? And I said, Mom, I have depression. And at the time, I didn't understand how hard that is to say. I didn't understand that it didn't change who I was. It just told me what I was going through. It didn't change me. I was still the same person before I said the word as I was after. But having to tell my mom that I had been diagnosed, it instantly made me reflect on, what did I do wrong? Why do I have this? What mistake did I make to get this? And I remember my dad getting on the phone. My dad said, he said, son, what's wrong? And I had to say it again. And my dad said, that's okay. He said, it's okay. He says, we love you. It's okay. What can we do? What do we need to do to help you? And so I said to my father, I said, Dad, Sean had depression and he died by suicide. I said, I'm scared I will die by suicide too. And we sat there on the phone, and my dad walked me through it. He said, you can come here anytime you want. You can pick up the phone anytime you want. You can talk to about this anytime you want. And it put me at a place of calm. My next phone call was to a friend, and this friend also played soccer with us on the same team. So I knew that he was familiar with suicide because we had already lost a friend to suicide. So I called him up and I said, Mike, I got something to tell you. Now, he's my second phone call to tell somebody publicly that I'm dealing with this depression. My parents had built me up and let me know it was good. It was okay to tell people. I felt good. I'm now going to a person who has lived the same life as me, that we lost a friend to depression. This should be another safe person. So I told him, I said, Mike, I got diagnosed with depression. And his comment was, you're stronger than that. That was his first comment. His second comment was, you don't have depression. And his third comment was, you don't need to take medication. And in an instant, I realized the problem with people dealing with depression. That represented the entire spectrum of how humanity treats this issue. On one hand, you have people who are ready to support you and they're eager to do the best they can to help you. And on the other hand, you have not even people that don't like you, but people that love you, that deny the reality of depression. They don't even want to acknowledge it exists, and they equate it to strength. And he thought he was motivating. That's the scary part. He thought he was motivating his friend to get through this. And so in that moment, I realized, okay, this is a problem because I now have a choice. I can treat the world like if they are Mike, and then shield myself and say, I can't tell people because they're going to deny me my reality. Or I can treat the world like if they're my parents, and I can tell people and hope they're supportive. And how I arrived at my decision was, I went back to Sean and I went, okay, Sean died by suicide. He didn't die by suicide. He died by suicide. He didn't die by depression. He died by silence. There are many people in the world that have depression. And because they get therapy, because they talk to people, because they find every solution, they can manage it. And because Sean was silent, he denied himself access to so many supports that's what actually led to his suicide. And in that moment, I realized I am not going down the path of silence. I'm going down the path of speaking about this. So I got my medicine, and I remember going to work And I said to my staff sergeant, my staff sergeant said, hey, I need a meeting with you. And they said, okay, no problem. I literally pulled out this box that's on the slide, and I slammed it down on the table, and I looked at them. I said, hey, I'm taking this. It's for depression. Here are the side effects. I felt like an infomercial for the drug. I should have been a salesperson for it. And I said, here's what I'm going through. Some days I'm going to be a great cop, and other days I'm going to struggle. But it's not because of a lack of desire. It's because some days I just don't have it. And here's how you can help me. Please do not take my gun away. Please don't put me in a back room, because I'm still a frontline officer, but I need support. They were amazing. They supported me through this in ways I couldn't have imagined, because I was told, oh, you can't tell anybody. And I thought to myself, I'm telling people because I need to figure out who the people in my life actually are. Are you a supporter, or are you a denier? Who are you? And if you're a denier, I simply won't talk to you about my struggles with depression. I'll talk to you about other things in my life, but you're not an ally for this. And I'll stay with my allies, but I needed to identify the landscape, put everybody where they belong, who can help and who can't. And that's what I decided to do. Jen, how are we doing or sorry, Louise, any questions so far? Comments? I can't, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, there we go. No questions. Everybody is listening, and we're about almost 20 to the hour, or
Okay,
25 to.
Perfect. So fast forward now to 2016, and I am still struggling with Sean's death. I post something on Sean's birthday, March 28th. And I just share with our friends, today Sean Peterson would have been 44. Miss you, my dear friend. You won't be forgotten. Now, another friend of mine who also played on our soccer team, a guy by the name of Garrett Morris. Garrett, he was a police officer in London. So we shared that commonality. First responder. We also experienced the loss of Sean. Garrett responded to my message, and he helped me cope. He said, such a shame, Rain, a brother lost, but not forgotten. After the Facebook message, we actually called, we talked to each other on the phone, and we talked about Sean and just the loss and the grief and what we were going through. And he helped me with it, and I helped him with it. We both, love Sean dearly. April 1st, just 3 days later, I'm at work, and I get this message from Geggs's father. We lost our younger son this morning, who's now looking down on all of us. RIP, Garrett, bless you. The minute I saw the message, I knew. There was nothing in the message to tell me why, but as soon as I saw the message, I looked at my colleague who was sitting with me, and I said, I just lost another friend to suicide. And he said, what do you mean? And I showed him the message, and he said, yeah, I think you did. And I got up, said, I got to go home. I can't stay here. And my boss, so for those that are familiar with Toronto, police headquarters is about maybe 2.5 kilometers from Union Station, which is where the GO train is. Told my boss I got to get home. My boss walked with me the 2.5 kilometers, and he watched me get on a GO train to get home. Took me 40 minutes to get home. He then called me and said, are you home? Yes, who's with you? And I share this because this is an amazing do something. When I asked him why he did that, he said, I was afraid you were going to hurt yourself. So I had to get you onto the train, make sure that you got home safely, and made sure somebody was with you. That's what he was doing. Again, I took some time off work. I struggled greatly with this because, again, I hadn't processed any of Sean's stuff yet. I hadn't seen anybody. I hadn't really dealt with it. July 26 or July 2016 comes along, and my dad finds my mom in the bathroom, and there's blood everywhere, and they take her to the hospital, and the hospital says that she prepare, get her affairs in order. We give her about a week to live. And at that moment, that's when I went, my backpack is too full. I do not have the capacity to do anything else. This, combined with the stress of work, combined with the loss of two friends, I don't know what I will do if I stay in a stressful job that is bringing other rocks. And so I went to my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm leaving policing. And she said, why? And I said, because if I'm policing when you pass away, I don't know what I will do. I don't know what I'm capable of doing, but I know it's probably going to be the wrong decision. Whereas if I am by your side, no matter what happens, at least I have peace with you. And with that, I left. So I'm going to stop there because I want us to get to questions. A lot of questions come up with, well, you know, what about leaving? Didn't the service support you? They absolutely did. The reason why I'm stopping there, I'm going to add a little bit. My mom ended up being okay. My mom is alive to this day. They found a tumor. They put her on chemo. A year later, she had surgery. And a few weeks after that, I started to go back to work. I went to a different job. I had the opportunity to go back to policing. And at the time, I knew that my backpack still had so much trauma that I hadn't dealt with, that I didn't have the space for policing. I didn't have the ability to put that back in my backpack unless I dealt with all the other events to reduce my backpack down to something manageable. And so I share that with you because do I miss policing? I miss it every single day. But what I don't miss is a backpack that feels like it's breaking. I don't miss lack of sleep. I don't miss a sense of hopelessness that things are always going to get worse. And so the solution isn't the same for everybody. But the only rock that I could take out of my backpack at the time was work. I couldn't not be a father. I couldn't turn back the traumas of losing my two friends. I couldn't turn back the traumas of work. And I couldn't turn back seeing my mom on the deathbed. But then once I knew that she was okay, that rock came out and it gave me space. It gave me space, right? Now, the last thing I want to touch on, and Louise, if there are questions, please feel free to jump in. During all of this, I still have a daughter who's getting older year by year. And she started to demonstrate some mental health challenges herself. And what happened was one day I noticed she was happy. And then immediately, like within seconds, I could see the darkness come over her. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said, everything's fine. And so, well, it's not fine. I know you, I can tell you're not good. And I said, if you don't tell me what's going on, I can't help you. I realized I wasn't a safe person by saying that. I made her guilty. If you don't tell me, I can't help you. The next morning I woke up, I apologized to her and said, that's not what I meant. What I meant was I want to be available for you if you can share with me. So she said, okay, Daddy, I accept your apology. And so we tried a different tactic because what I said to her was, maybe you don't know how to describe what you're feeling, which is quite often for people with depression. You don't know how to describe what is causing you to feel what you're feeling. You just know you're off. So I said to her, I said, honey, if your mind was weather, what weather would it be? And she said, it would be thunder and lightning, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and fire. And when I heard that, I realized this kid is dealing with a lot and none of it is good. And so in that moment, I realized we had a communication tool, right? For people that can't describe what they're going through in a place of darkness, there might not be words currently available to them because they don't know what it is, that we have to create other opportunities. And so the weather opportunity is a good one because it's common language. I don't think there's any of us out there that go, man, I can't wait for the next thunder and lightning day so I can go fly a kite. I don't think any of us are waiting for the next hurricane so we can go outside and play, right? We all know that certain weather events there's no denying their impact on our lives. And so that's the terminology that my daughter and I use all the time, is we talk about weather. And I say to you, hey kid, how's your weather? And she tells me, hey dad, it's sunny today. I'm like, great, I know my kid is okay. I shared this with some police officers, and we now use that as language because some of the officers now, when they talk to each other, it creates an opportunity for them to talk in any space where they are with each other to say, I'm not doing well, or I'm okay. And they can do it wherever they are to still communicate they need some assistance without feeling like somebody else might have a judgment on what they're feeling, right? So, I think it's important for us to create dialogue that we can use interchangeably with one another. If you feel like you're not somewhere safe, but you do identify one safe person in a room, what language can we use together to still support one another, right? So that's what the weather is all about. Is that's how we use it to help communicate about our feelings, right? Are there any questions? Are there any curiosities before I share some key points that I'd like to hopefully leave you with? I am open to any questions. So I really hope that I hope everybody feels okay. One of the questions I get quite often is, did I have any addictions? So people are afraid to ask. And again, this is a space we have to be able to do this, right? I abused alcohol for several years. Going through this stuff, that was my go-to. I'm not a drug user, never have been. And then I realized that I wasn't even using alcohol to numb pain. I was using alcohol to feel the physical pain that my mind felt. I wanted my body and my mind to feel the same. And quite often my mind was in a bad place, but yet I was physically functioning. I was able to go to work. I was able to perform. I actually wanted my body to not function, just like how I felt my mind wasn't, right? And then it wasn't until I started realizing that I had purpose. I actually had reasons to live. And I realized that's not helping me do those things. And so it took a long time to get to that place, right?
Mark, there is a question here, and it's what was your experience? And obviously everybody's different here, but what was your experience like on medication? Did you have to switch meds at all? If you're comfortable sharing, is it something?
A fantastic question. So I'm so happy you asked it. It's one of my favorite questions because it kind of vindicates some things. So if you remember, I shared with you that I went to my doctor. My doctor put me on Cipralex. I took it religiously. I trusted the doctor. I was like, they're the expert. And I took it for years. I took it for 4 years. 2017, Vivian's mom and I got divorced, right? My partner, in 2017, my partner says to me, and she's not a doctor, she's not in the medical field. She says, I don't think your medication's helping. And I said, how so? She's like, you still have trouble sleeping. Your thinking sometimes is really off, like you seem really dark. And she said, I'm booking you an appointment to see a psychiatrist. And I was like, okay. So I went to the psychiatrist and he says, why are you here? He's not the warmest man, but he was actually perfect for what I needed. Why are you here? I said, well, doc, I got diagnosed with depression. Who told you you have depression? And I was like, well, is this a jury trial right now? What are we doing here? I thought I was a patient. I said, well, my doctor did. He goes, well, why do they say you have depression? And so I told him all the traumas, and he just looked at me and goes, you don't have depression. You need something for sleep. And I was like, I'm like, that's what I told the doctor, right? So he gave me sleep medication, but he also gave me medication for depression, but it was a very low dose. But what he told me, which was interesting, he said, the medication my doctor put me on, he said, you got the wrong dose. The dose would have done nothing. You were told to take it at night. It would keep you awake. You should take it in the morning. So my doctor actually contributed to my problem, making it worse for 4 years. So I ended up taking the stuff that the psychiatrist recommended. It worked perfectly for sleep, but I ended up being very groggy all day. But when COVID hit, I don't recommend this, but it is what I did, and I'm being very candid about it. When COVID hit and I was able to work from home, it took out one more rock for me, because I had a lot of anxiety about working in spaces with teams and working with the public. I was still trying to get through some of that. So being isolated while I worked, I was like, oh, there's another rock gone. Maybe I don't need this medication. Maybe I will sleep better. Maybe. And so I decided to get off of it without my doctor's advice. So don't do that. Go and talk to the doctor about what you do. And ultimately, you can still make your decision. But it actually worked for me. Right? Because I realized that it was another rock, and I knew that some of the stuff I was going through had to do with my rocks, and my stresses and stuff were impacting my brain chemistry. So as soon as I started to tweak things in my life, given time, things started to work. And so yes, the medication thing it's a great question, because I think often we do trust doctors, and we don't necessarily challenge that. We kind of go with it because, they're the experts, right?
And so were you able to wean off is kind of this other part of that question.
Yeah.
Did you stay
Alcohol,
off?
yeah. So alcohol is like, I have it birthdays and celebrations, but it's like one glass. I know that it is, once I get that feeling like, hey, I want to have a lot, I know that there's something else going on. I'm like, that is not your solution.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and the medication, I'm not on any medication at all. I still have it. It's still here. I didn't go so far as to go, I don't need, I'm going to toss it. I have it. I know that I especially the sleep meds, I kept them, but I've learned other strategies to help me sleep, right? I've learned how to help my mind calm. I've learned that I do need to put in some work for mental health. It's not as simple as, well, I don't need to do anything for my mental health. What I understand now is that when I feel mentally unwell, I do tell people, hey, I'm not feeling best. I'm feeling dark. I'm feeling these things. Can you just check in on me? And I know that everybody goes through moments of grief and darkness and things like that, that doesn't not like, it shouldn't connect immediately to, oh, it's depression, right? My father passed away 7 weeks ago. And a lot of people thought, oh, this thing is going to take this guy down when he's feeling good. And I have navigated the loss of my father better than I thought I would, but I'm in a place of grief. But I understand that what I'm feeling is directly connected to an event that has that natural response. Right? Yeah. And so what I've understood now is that when I go to a dark place and I can't connect it to something, I'm like, oh, this is depression trying to reclaim your mind, because it's not connected to anything. Life is good, work is good, family life is good, like everything's going well, but yet you feel dark. I'm like, that's depression. That's it trying to reassert itself. I'm like, okay, you need to get on the phone, talk to people, find your supports. You need to now watch your sleep and go, okay, you need to go to bed early, meditate, listen to music, calm yourself. You need to do all these things because this thing is trying to come back in. And so you have to get through it because wellness is coming right around the corner, right? That resilience piece is that you go through depression and you come back out, you're feeling good again, but you're not necessarily going to stay there. And that's okay, because you're also not going to stay in depression the whole time either. You're going to come back out, right? But you gotta be willing to do that work, right?
I was just going to say, so you've developed a good ability to recognize indicators in yourself.
Yeah.
Earlier, it sounds like, and that you have strategies and tools then to
definitely
remove the rocks in your backpack.
Definitely. And I would add that my partner, so this is where the disclosure, talking to people and really making sure that you minimize the impact of silence. Because my partner and I talk about this so regularly, one of the things she recognized is that when my depression starts to creep back in, I actually stop eating, and I never noticed it. So she'll say, "Hey, what did you eat today?" And I'm like, "Nothing. I woke up, had a coffee." She's like, "Did you have anything else?" I'm like, "No, I might have had an apple." And she's like, "It's like 6 o'clock in the evening and you haven't eaten anything." And she goes, "Are you hungry?" And I said, "No, I'm fine." Within a couple days, I'm back in depression. So when she sees I'm not eating, she's like, "Honey, you know what? This thing is starting to come back. We need to, maybe we can stop it now, right? We got to do some things. You got to eat. Let's try and get you to bed." And so she's actively trying to minimize the impact of when these cycles come back, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. We just have a few minutes left, Mark. There is another question here, just about keeping, like, how does one, if one's contemplating or going on long-term stress leave, any ideas on coping and getting by, particularly given some of the financial obligations and such? I know everybody's situation is different here, so
it is, right? So that one is a really tough one, because I have been asked that a lot. And so in the process of what I went through, I did have to give up my apartment, right? I did have to make changes, like very significant financial changes. So what I say to that, though, is this, and this is hard, and I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do. It wasn't for me, right? I had to put aside pride. I had to move. I had to find supports to live with my daughter and all these things. But the alternative in my mind was very stark. If I don't do everything I can to remove rocks from my backpack, that if it gets overflowed or if it breaks, I might die. I was like, okay, I could keep my job and have money and die by suicide. It was always up against death, right? And so I think, it's not a perfect answer, but I think the one thing I am very certain of is, for every single one of us, if the people who love us knew that support might include having us stay with them for some period of time until we are well, or we might die, there are very few people that are like, I'm willing to take the risk, right? And I can say that I look at that with Sean. Sean's a great example. Sean lived with us on and off while him and his wife were figuring things out. And, if I knew that there was something I could have done to give Sean another day, week, month to get out of that darkness and back into where he lived most of his life, I would have been willing to do it. I would have done whatever it took, right? And so this is where this gets hard, is that when your mind is not well, you don't think of your value to those that love you as being as high as it is. You think you are worthless. You think people will not do the things they would happily do to keep you here alive, right? So for anybody that's listening, like, I think the conversation really needs to be very candid. You're not threatening people saying, hey, if you don't put me up for a month, I'm going to die. what it is I'm in a really dark place, and the only way I can get through this is I have to move some rocks, which means I have to go on leave, which means I might have to give up my apartment for a few months till I get back on my feet. Can you help me? Can you support me? And you will find that when people hear that you are trying to get yourself back to a place of being well, but it requires some sacrifice and some support, people tend to step up, right? And, you know, I'll say this, Viv's mom, her name is Danielle, she's going through that right now. She ended up with a brain tumor a couple of years ago. She's not been working. And she got to a point where her health, both mental and physical health, was so poor, she was about to be evicted from her house. And everybody around her was like, tell us what you need, because we don't want to lose you to mental health.
Yeah.
But yet she was not asking for that help because the pride wouldn't allow her to say to people, I'm in dire straits.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't until everybody started talking about it. And I actually said to them, given what I know, if you don't intervene, she is going to think the only way out is suicide. You guys need to step in. And they did. Right? And so I agree. The financial thing is a critical piece, and it adds a lot of pressure. But I say to people, first and foremost, you need to be here on the planet to be able to navigate financial stress. So the first thing is always got to be, how do I give myself to actually sort out my financial thing, right? So we need to find our allies. And the only way to do that is to talk to people, right? To tell them what you're going through.
Yeah, breaking the silence and knowing where your allies are. You know, it takes courage. And Marc, I just want to say, you know, how much respect I have, and I know, we all probably have for you in terms of your willingness to be vulnerable, your willingness to share your story and your situation and your strategies, and just being so vulnerable. It really helps people to understand that, they're not the only ones, they're not alone, and that there are ways forward, and you don't have to stay silent. And there are resources and tools out there to help. So, I'm gonna thank you now so much for doing this, and then have you close off, because we're just a couple of minutes past, and I just want to give you an opportunity here to close off. And thank you so much for speaking out.
No, thank you as well. So I'm going to go real quick. Watch for your blind spots, right? I had tons of them. Talked with your loved ones, right? This is about you. And so you need to recruit people. Find the safe language, right? Yeah, and then manage your rocks, right? So keep stock of what is going on and what can be quickly taken out and what might need more time. So moving might take more time, but if you introduce it as a thought, your stress levels come down. Maybe I have to move. Let me see who I would love to live with that might feel the same way. There are ways we can do it, right? Identify the safe people, be that safe person, and be intentional with your communication. If you're feeling something, be direct about it. I don't want to live. Sean was direct, and I helped him for a day, but I didn't help him for the last 5 months of his life. And the final thing I share with you is this. This is what I felt when my father passed away. My uncle asked me how I was feeling, and I said to my uncle, I am broken. I said, there's no other word to describe the loss of my dad. But I said, here's what I know. I'm like a jigsaw puzzle. All the pieces are still here. It's just broken. And I just need to put it back together. And this is what mental resilience is about, is no matter what you're feeling now, you can be as broken as you could possibly imagine or beyond it. But remember, you're a jigsaw puzzle. You still have all the pieces. And we solve a jigsaw puzzle quicker if we invite people to help us with it. It goes really slow if we do it on our own, but a couple more hands in there, we can solve a jigsaw puzzle really fast. And with Louise, Jen, Eric, and to everybody that joined us. I really appreciate talking with you all. Louise, if there are any questions beyond this, or if there are questions with people that listen later, I am happy to be available to make sure that we address those things, because this is a great conversation that hopefully we...
So important, you know. I hope you saw the hearts floating up there.
I haven't, but you know what? I'm going to stop sharing.
Lots of hearts. So, and we will record this presentation. And so it is available. And Mark, just because of people's schedules and stuff, the recording is something that gets watched regularly by people, whether it's going back or they didn't have an opportunity to see it. So it will be there on our Encompas website. And just one other quick thing I wanted to mention, because we talked about medication and there was interest in medication, but within the Encompas program, there is the opportunity to have a consult with a psychiatrist for the members. A lot of times that's used as a second opinion on medication review, can, you know, kind of work with you and your family doctor around that. So that is available through the Encompas program as well. So Mark, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You listen, I would not be here if not for Jen. So I got to give Jen a big, huge shout out for that. And Louise, for you supporting Jen and for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I hope that it helps. I hope it helps people. I hope there's strategies that people can use. The weather thing's really great. So if you have kids, talk to them about weather.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, give them the opportunity to let you know in a very broad sense that they're where they are at emotionally, right? With that, I'll kick it back to you. Thank you so much.
And the backpack is such an important piece. The backpack is not about strength, it's about capacity. Yeah. So some wonderful metaphors and analogies for helping to make this very difficult challenge more manageable. So Marc, so much thanks to you, and we will be in touch. All right, everybody, I wish you the best. This is our last session until the new year, and we'll be out with communication around what's coming then. So thank you all. Have a great day. Take care.